when you're first getting started, everything just seems big, it's new, it feels a little foreign, but the better you get, the more proficient, the more expertise you develop, naturally, the more fine-tuned details you start to spot. What's really interesting is that once you've learned to read the conditions, once you've learned to navigate and get yourself out into the right position and position accordingly, a lot of times these opportunities will come to you. It's really about positioning. If you're out of position, it doesn't matter what happens because the waves will always pass you by. But once you know how to position and read the conditions properly, these opportunities will literally come right to you.
What if you could build a business in the modern world as big or as small as you want without having to compromise the things that were the most important to you in the very beginning? This is the Wealthy Consultant Talks Podcast with Taylor Welch and Mike Walker, as they share with you today their learning lessons from stories in their experiences over the past 10 to 15 years and share with you right here, right now. Let's get into it.
Hey, what is going on, my friends? Mike Walker here, and welcome to another episode of the Wealthy Consultant Podcast. Excited to have you with me today. We're going to go into something that's kind of fun for me, and I think it's going to be good for you. It's going to be a win-win of an episode today. And that is, we're going into some pro-level business building concepts. I've got some notes here I want to share with you, and we're going to extract some insights, some actionable insights that you can install into your business, into your overall methodology and how you operate your business as an entrepreneur, leader, mentor, whatever you categorize yourself as. Some of these tips I think you're going to be able to apply right away, but we're actually going to extract these insights from a passion of mine, which is surfing. And if you're watching this in the video format, you will see behind me, you've got pictures of waves and surfboards and all kinds of cool stuff. I've been surfing since I was a little kid, and it's pretty much my main sport. And there's a lot of cool, interesting things that you can pull from nature. It's one of my favorite elements of the consulting environment is actually being, somebody that notices things and actually has their eyes open to the world around them and how there's so many cool insights that we can draw from nature. There's so many fractal patterns. There's so many elements and conditions that happen, the seasonality of things, right? This cyclical nature of everything that is around us, the energy and all the things. Well, all of this absolutely has a direct impact, of course, in the world of business as well. And there's a lot of analogies that we can pull from this. And I want to kind of draw from the surfing vernacular with you and give you some insight. So it doesn't matter if you surf or not. All right. I promise you don't need to be in or around the ocean to get what I'm going to be throwing down for you today. But there's some cool things here that I think you're going to like. So let's get into the first of three kind of categories or topics I have for us planned today. The first one is understanding, reading the conditions that we're in. When you are first learning to surf, typically what happens is you got your board with you, maybe you got an instructor, depends on, how you're getting started, of course, but you end up at the water's edge, right? And you're standing there for the first time. You're probably a little bit nervous or at least tentative, surely excited, I would hope. But you're standing at the water's edge. You're just kind of looking at it. You just see water moving at you. You see the ocean kind of moving around. You got sand between your toes. Hopefully the weather's nice, but you got a little visual, some sun going on, and you're in a good place. But when you look out at the ocean, all you're really going to see is just a big body of water and some waves moving around, right? That's when you're first starting out, that's basically all you're really going to pick up is like, wow, this is wild. Like there's waves moving at me and I got to figure out how to stand on one of those. Like this is wild. But what's interesting is that over time, over the years of getting more and more proficient at surfing, what will happen is as you walk to the water's edge and as you're preparing to paddle out into the water, the level of clarity, the definition of what you see out there completely changes, You'll be looking, you could have someone that's just brand new, first time novice and a pro level surfer standing side by side looking at the same ocean, and they would absolutely see things completely differently. And it's not that they're seeing something that's not there or anything like that. It's just they don't notice the nuances. And this is very much like the entrepreneurial experience as well, is where when you're first getting started, everything just seems big, it's new, it feels a little foreign, and you're like, wow, you just see kind of the big stuff, the macro things. But the better you get, the more proficient, the more expertise you develop, naturally, the more fine-tuned details you start to spot, you see the little nuances of things. And that's very much like in surfing, where as you get better and better, you stand at the water's edge and you can actually pick up a lot of things. You can get a feel for what direction the tide is. Is it going out? Is it coming in? Where's the best place to paddle out? Where are the best waves forming? Where are people being kind of pulled by the currents? How can you use that to your advantage? There's just a lot of things that you can draw from immediately as you get better and better. And so that's one of the elements, is just understanding that the longer you're in the game, the more you're going to be able to see. Now, seems pretty basic, and it relatively is, but here's kind of the interesting component. A lot of people, when they get into year 2, 3, 4, 5 of their business, they start thinking like, man, why is this seeming so hard? It's like the better I get, the more challenging things get. Well, it's just because you are now seeing so much more than you used to see. Those challenges, those roadblocks, those hindrances that maybe you didn't see before, they've always been there. You just maybe didn't pick up on the level of detail. You didn't have like that high definition view of what was actually going on. And so the better you get in the game, both surfing and of course the direct parallel here, being in business, just know that the better you get, the more you'll look at things and realize, wow, I have so much still to learn. Maybe you've heard people say that, right? Like the better I get, the smarter I get, the more I realize I don't know anything, right? Some of the most intelligent, most genius people on the planet in history and even today, all will kind of echo that same thing. Is like, man, the smarter I get, the less I feel I know. And that's because they just start seeing the immense amount of detail and the immense amount of little nuances and little things that you just simply didn't know before. You didn't know what you didn't know. And in the world of business, this is definitely very, very true. But second to this is starting to read the conditions. And I'll never forget, this is kind of a funny piece of the story here. This was very far into my journey as a surfer. And I was at the water's edge one day and stretching, getting ready to paddle out. And a buddy of mine who was even better surfer, he's literally like one of the elite pros of that time. We were talking about to paddle out, and I was like, man, the waves suck today, man. Like I was just kind of frustrated because the waves just weren't good. We're going to paddle out because that's what we do. But it was very clear that the waves were suboptimal, to say the least. But we're going to go out because we wanted to work out. We want to get better and all things. And he looked at me kind of funny. He's like, man, why are you going to get pissed at the ocean? And I realized, I stopped right there and I was like, that actually kind of makes sense. Like, why am I going to get mad at the ocean? Like, how is that possibly going to help me, right? Is anything about me being pissed or being frustrated by the conditions of the ocean, is that going to change the ocean at all? Of course not, right? Like, we don't have that power. So as simple as this is, I want to kind of reframe this in the light of business. Oh man, Mike, the economy is blah, blah, blah. Or, oh man, my customers are blah, 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 whatever, right? What are you going to do about it? Like, just bitch and moan? Or are you going to change something? You're going to have to reframe the intent in which you have to go deal with those things. And so for me, back then, surfing was like, all right, well, instead of just being frustrated and pissed off about the ocean, the waves being bad that day, I'm going to reframe my view of this going, okay, so today I'm going to learn how to surf these types of crappy waves, right? Like I turned it into a challenge, or the focus of my intent was not, man, these waves aren't good or fun. It was, these are really hard or very, just not very enjoyable. How can I get better because of this? Again, very simple frame, but it makes an immense difference in how you approach the process. And in business, as I'm sure you're very well aware, not everything is going to be roses and rainbows. Like there's going to be times, even entire seasons, that are very arduous or suboptimal, extremely challenging. And how we look at that matters. Am I saying that you have to be happy? Oh, I'm so glad it's not good. No, of course not. I'm not suggesting that you have to be okay or be happy about it and just pretend it's okay. But I do want to emphasize the importance of reframing how you're going to go about it. Because the interesting thing is, as you get better and better in surfing, you can paddle out into waves and still do quite well. Because you've practiced it. You've gotten good at riding waves that aren't good. When the waves are perfect, smooth, clear, just perfect water, perfect setup, just excellent conditions, naturally everybody is going to find that easier and probably a little bit more fun. But you can put a pro level surfer into an environment where the waves are quite crappy, honestly, and they will still do amazing because they've practiced, they've put in the time, and they don't look at it as being frustrated. The waves suck. Well, yeah, they suck, but I'm still going to, tear it up and do my thing. So again, just consider how you frame and how you view the conditions that you are in. Definitely an important piece. Second topic here. So that was number one, reading the conditions. Number two, using bad or dangerous conditions to your advantage. This is really, really a cool strategy for those who may be looking at things and wondering, wow, this, it seems kind of tumultuous out there. I don't know what's going on with the economy. My industry in particular is really having a hard time, whatever. Understand that you can use those types of conditions to your advantage, especially when a lot of your competition is trying to avoid the bad things. You'll see this a lot when going into any kind of like economic constriction. People really brace up. They kind of go into hibernation mode. They start pulling back on expenses. They start, or rather stop being as proactive because they're just kind of in this like conservation mode, kind of hibernation, just buckle down and hold on tight and hopefully they make it. Well, that's okay if that's the approach you want to take. But my advice is always take advantage of the fact that people are going on a mental holiday at this point, or at least a mental survival mode. And if you actually step out into those dangerous environments, it puts you in a unique position where you can actually take advantage of the fact that a huge swath of your market is kind of checked out mentally, emotionally, or otherwise. And so in the surfing world, we would use rip currents. If you're not familiar with rip currents, imagine, just visualize here for a second, you're looking out the ocean, right? You have waves moving into the shore. All right. Now, just think about the fact that all this water that's moving in with these waves, where does that go? Well, it's got to go back out to the ocean somehow, right? Because it can't just keep coming to shore. If it kept coming to shore, you're going to get the ocean's going to move up into the land, right? Like you're dealing with a tidal wave at that point. No, you've got water coming in and naturally it has to flow back out. It's got to go back out into the ocean, right? Well, what happens naturally is that the currents will naturally form a rip current. So the waves moving in will then kind of funnel back out and you get this reverse flow of water heading back out to sea. These are called rip currents, very natural part of the process. And it can be actually a very extremely dangerous part of the ocean experience and surfing experience. If number one, you don't know how to identify a rip current for what it is, or two, know how to get out of one if you find yourself in one. But as you get really proficient with surfing, we'll actually use rip currents to get out to the sea, because which direction is that water flowing? Out to the waves, right? It's going out into the water. And so once you are proficient and strong enough of a swimmer and understand what the heck you're doing, you can actually use this quote unquote dangerous condition to your advantage. Because what's an interesting thing about rip currents is that with generally speaking, when all that water is moving back out to the sea, because of that reverse flow, waves don't break there. It's literally like a river heading back out to the ocean, out to what we call the lineup, where you kind of wait for the actual waves to come. And so what makes that really advantageous as a surfer is the fact that you don't have a bunch of water hitting you, that you're trying to get underneath as you're heading back out to ocean. If you can imagine like paddling from the shore out to what we call that lineup where we wait for the waves, there's a lot of waves between you and that lineup. And so the bigger those waves, the harder it is to get out because you've got so much water, so much energy pushing you back to shore, right? Well, if that's the case, you can actually use rip currents to get back out to, the lineup and wait for another wave far more effectively, certainly faster, and definitely with a lot less effort. You conserve a lot of energy when you do that. And same in business, if you can identify quote unquote dangerous conditions, what a lot of people would associate to that, if you're savvy, I'm not just suggesting jumping in blind, but if you know what you're doing, you can actually use these dangerous conditions to your advantage because there's so much less effort required to get out or to get seen in the marketplace because so fewer people are using that strategy. And so it's just another concept to understand is number one, being able to read the conditions. Number two, when you can identify those types of rip currents or different movements in the economy, you can actually use that to your advantage. Whereas, maybe your competition is running scared. And part of that is a lot of these types of currents will form next to what we call jetties, these long pier-like structures of rocks, or even man-made piers, like the ones that actually stick out into the water. a lot of times these rip currents will form underneath or very close to these structures. And so what you'll find is if you can start to identify trends in your market, a lot of times the opportunities lie very close to that danger zone, not necessarily even in it, but very close to it. And so what that might look like in terms of a practical application would be, wow, like this industry or this particular type of customer is always known for being very difficult, or this type of product or this type of service is always proven to be very, difficult to be profitable. But sometimes you can get right next to that with a slight variation of that and find it really, profitable because so few people know to touch it. They don't necessarily know how to tap into that, again, quote unquote, dangerous current or energy. And you're just getting close enough to it to where you can actually have, a lot less competition and a lot easier of a flow or current of energy, and i.e., money or resources. All right. So number one, read the conditions. Number two, using those quote unquote dangerous conditions to your advantage. And then lastly, understanding the concept of catching waves. When you're waiting out in the lineup once you finally got out there and you're just waiting for those waves, it's important to understand that these waves are moving to you. They're literally moving out from the vast ocean and moving steadily towards shore. And these waves, what in the business world we could call opportunities, are moving towards you. And the interesting component about that is a lot of people in business are running around trying to find their next wave. Where's that next opportunity coming from, right? And they're running around all over the place. What's really interesting is that once you've learned to read the conditions, once you've learned to navigate and get yourself out into the right position and position accordingly, a lot of times these opportunities will come to you. It's really about positioning. If you're out of position, it doesn't matter what happens because the waves will always pass you by, those quote unquote opportunities, right? But once you know how to position and read the conditions properly, these opportunities will literally come right to you. And then what's really cool about that is that our job is not to necessarily go and grab it. It's to start moving in its own direction. And so in surfing, what happens is as soon as you start to see a swell bump up on the horizon, you immediately turn around and start paddling to shore. Why would you do that? The wave is out there. Why would I be paddling short? You've got to turn around and start building momentum in the same direction that opportunity or that wave is coming, right? So you actually have to build momentum. You have to generate some speed in the same direction that swell is coming, so that by the time it does reach you, you have kind of an equilibrium between the ocean's swell and your paddling, your board underneath your body. And you actually need those things to sync up. And so what happens is learning how to read those opportunities. If you spin too late and don't paddle in time, the wave is moving at a speed at which it'll just pass you by. It'll literally go right by you because you weren't moving quick enough. You didn't spin around and start getting into that direction. And likewise, if you start paddling, and you paddle too soon, the wave's going to break on you because you've now gone beyond where it's even breaking, and it's going to probably tumble you and give you a good ride, but underwater ride, right? Not something you want. And so that's kind of that nuance where you have to start to identify opportunities early enough to turn around and start paddling in that direction. So let me give you, again, a practical kind of real life example of this in the business world. It would be, wow, you know what? I see something coming. I see a trend starting to develop on the horizon. It's not here yet, but I do see that there looks to be some opportunity. Let's start paddling in that direction. Let's turn around and start going that direction, but just enough to keep an eye on it, keep looking back at it and going, is it still is it still coming at me? Does it still look like a good opportunity, or is it one that I need to let it by, right? We don't need to catch every wave. We certainly don't want to catch every opportunity. We just want to catch the good ones, the right ones, right? So as you're paddling in its same direction, keep looking back over your shoulder. Is this still the right wave? Is this still the right opportunity? Is this still the one that I want to ride, or should I let it go? Because just because we can ride it doesn't mean that we should ride it. Not every wave is created equal. And so the better we get at reading an opportunity, or in this case of surfing, the better you get at reading the shape of that swell, the way that it's moving and the way that it's kind of starting to build as it gets closer and closer to shore, you become more and more skilled at understanding where you need to be in position to ride that wave. And that really just comes down to effort and timing and practice. There really isn't a black and white template that you can use, because think about it, just like the ocean, every wave is literally unique. That's what makes surfing so challenging, honestly, is that, consider a lot of other sports, and they're great sports, but just consider how different they are. You've got skateboarding or snowboarding or skiing or, whatever, right? Riding bikes. These mediums that you're riding are essentially static. Those things don't change, right? You change, the body and everything that you're doing can change and adapt, but the material or the surface that you are on doesn't really change. If you're on a skateboard, you go on the same part of the street, that street doesn't change. Same with bikes. You go on the same trail, that trail doesn't really change that much. If it does over time, that's fine, but it's not so dynamic. In surfing, the medium in which you are riding is literally liquid. It's fluid, changing every second. And that one wave that you do ride will never be there again. It will always be different underneath you. And that's what makes it so difficult to get good, because every wave you're on is a new experience. And what's interesting, again, parallel to the economy and parallel to building businesses, every opportunity that comes by you in business, technically speaking, will be that much more unique as well, because you have all these new variables, technology changes, team changes, you get better, of course, clients and the market demands change. There's so many things that change so fluidly, so dynamically, that every opportunity that comes by you, you truly are dealing with the new set of variables. And that's why it makes it so challenging as well. And so getting to your feet smoothly, once you understood how to catch those opportunities, the next is getting to your feet smoothly. How do you do that? Again, it's just repetition. When I was first starting out as a kid, I would literally take my surfboard, put it on the floor of my bedroom with a pillow under it so that they wouldn't break the fins off. And I would literally lay on it and pretend I was paddling, and then pop to my feet over and over and over again, because I couldn't get to the beach every day like I would like to, because I wasn't driving then. And so anytime I could, I was in my room practicing paddling up or popping up rather. And as funny as that may look, I'm sure it looked kind of funny. It helped a lot, because then when I got out into the water and the real, life experiences, I was able to get to my feet far more efficiently, far more quickly, which allows for a much better experience. You get to your feet quickly, and surfing means you're up and going and riding that momentum. And the last piece of this is just learning to understand that for different types of waves require different styles of riding. And you need to understand that when you read the environment, you have to kind of approach that wave differently and ride it differently. You can't force yourself onto that wave. It's again, taking the surfing conditions to mind. If you have this really big, powerful wave, well, I can push against that wave a lot. It's gonna handle it, right? It's extremely powerful force. And I'm riding a double overhead wave, we'll say, 10 to 12 feet high. Well, naturally, I can do a lot on that because there's so much power behind it. But the inverse of that, let's say the wave is only knee high. Well, a lot less power. And because of my weight and because of everything else, like I'm not gonna be able to ride that wave the same way. There's a very different way of riding a wave that's barely waist high and a wave that is more than double over your head, right? Significantly different styles of riding. And it's the same in business. We have to realize that there is seasonality to business. There are seasons where sometimes things are going to be moving really quickly, very dynamically, very powerfully, and we can be a little bit more aggressive. Then there's other times that we're going to have to be a little bit more agile, a little bit lighter on our feet, and just know that, hey, for right now, I've got to approach things a little bit differently. And again, as basic as this is, it's amazing how many times I'll speak with clients and like, man, we used to do it this way, and it's like, it's not working that way anymore. And they'll feel kind of exasperated about the fact that, well, what used to work is no longer working. Yeah, that's called business. That's called nature, right? That's just called like things change. And we have to understand that in business, we have to stay fluid. We have to be able to evolve as the conditions that we are in evolve. And again, if you take these three concepts, learning to read the conditions and just understand that as you get better, as you become more knowledgeable, you're going to start seeing things differently. And it's going to allow you to make more defined, clearly, more agile decisions about where you want to paddle out. You're also going to be able to read the conditions faster and understand, hey, where are those conditions? Where are those dangerous opportunities that maybe others in the market are not able to tap into? But because I know how to identify them for what they are, we can take advantage of it. And then lastly, catching those opportunities or catching those waves, learning when to let things pass you by and when to paddle hard and catch the ones that you actually want. Every opportunity isn't like the right opportunity, okay? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And it's just a matter of understanding that, hey, look, I'm looking for the right waves at the right time and position accordingly. If you do that, if you do position yourself properly, catching them becomes a whole lot more efficient because you're not going against the current so hard. You're actually paddling in the right direction and you're going with the flow. You're going with the momentum, and catching that energy, catching that opportunity becomes significantly easier. So anyway, guys, that's it for now. I just want to drop some surfing vernacular on you, some surfing insiders language. And take these, if you don't surf at all, you surf in the economy on some level. If you own a business, you certainly do. And but anyway, I hope you get some out of this talk and apply it. I'd love to know your thoughts. If you're watching this on any kind of medium that you can drop a comment, would love to get your feedback on it. Stay tuned for another episode of the Wealthy Consultant Podcast. Love you guys. Take care.